Welcome to this first week in September's Autism News. I am kicking off this week's news with a story that is affecting the entire country. 46 attorney generals are calling on Congress to pass the Autism Cares Act of 2019. The act is to provide funding for autism support and research. The act has to be renewed because the previous legislation is going to expire on September 30th. The Attorney General of Kentucky said basically this act needs to be passed so that there aren't gaps in care for families there in Kentucky or anywhere across the country. The Autism Cares Act prioritizes community-based solutions that incorporate adults who are on the spectrum into society. These include job-related activities that promote independence and activities that reinforce daily living skills. In the House, the act exists as H.R. 1058, and in the Senate it is S. 427. And in other news, last week I told you the Anthem in Indiana was going to be cutting payments for autism therapies, and they have now backed away from that. They have said that they are not going to be cutting payments for two types of therapies, although they still are for one. And this comes as Indiana joins in other states calling for a renewal of the autism funding with the Autism Cares Act of 2019. One of the most interesting things that I read this week was from the BBC News, and it was about the daily discrimination that people on the autism spectrum face when at work or when seeking work. The particular survey they were looking at was in Wales, where 31,000 people are on the spectrum. In Wales, 16% of autistic adults work, and of those that didn't work, 77% want to work. One of the barriers to working is that there are not reasonable adaptations in the workplace, even though in Wales those are required under the Equality Act. There is a Working with Autism program. Since the program launched in 2015, 1,010 people have completed it. And at the same time, fewer than 100 companies have signed up with the Positive About Working with Autism charter, and oftentimes health boards, police departments, and other public bodies were not on the list of that charter. And bear with me on pronunciation here, but I thought this quote was really good. Mallory Thomas of the National Autistic Society of Cammie said, "With a little understanding and small changes to the recruitment process and workplace, autistic adults can be a real asset to all sorts of businesses." Which is obviously very true. And you didn't think I was going to get through the news without mentioning a new study. Every week there's a new autism study or another autism study that I'm talking about, and this week is no different. This week we are talking about the extreme male brain theory of autism, which is of course always interesting when you have at least two girls who are on the spectrum. A new study is challenging the suggestions that testosterone reduces cognitive empathy or the ability to read other people's emotional states, and that has something to do with why people are on the autism spectrum. This new study takes the form of controlled trials that included a total of 643 adult males. It is the largest study of its kind. The report is in the Proceedings of the Royal Society Biological Sciences paper. They say that earlier studies that have found links between testosterone and lower cognitive empathy have relied on very small samples and so had insufficient statistical power to establish a direct link. They claim that their results show that there is absolutely not a linear relationship between exposure to testosterone and cognitive empathy. So basically this whole thing is really interesting to me, and I guess the original theory has to do with the length of your ring finger and your pointer finger, and with how testosterone development causes the ratio to be different. I guess with more testosterone, I believe it's your ring finger is longer, or some scientists believe that apparently. And as a result, some people have used that ratio as a proxy for pre-birth exposure to testosterone. There was a study in 2011 that found that giving testosterone to healthy adult females appeared to reduce their ability to read others' emotions. So the team doing the study decided to look at this theory. They did two randomized control trials in which 643 healthy adult males received either testosterone or a placebo gel pack. After they received these gel treatments, the participants filled out questionnaires and matched them to descriptions of emotional states. The researchers found there was no difference in their cognitive empathy between those given testosterone and those not given testosterone. And so the conclusion of the researchers was that if testosterone does have an effect, it's a complex effect, not a linear effect. For the final news of the day, the Army is launching an investigation into how a teen with anxiety who is on the autism spectrum was able to report for basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. The young man's father is trying to help his son return home after this incident. His son had reported for basic training on August 20th, but began having anxiety attacks. He is being out-processed because he didn't disclose his diagnosed disorders, but this isn't entirely true. There are text messages that show that he had in fact told the recruiter about what was going on, about his diagnoses, and that they'd already kept him from being in the Navy, and the recruiter had texted him and said, let's talk about this on the phone. So the recruiter knew. He also had congenital arm disorders, and his father kept thinking that all of this would keep him from being able to go into the Army, and kept waiting for that to happen, and kept telling him that that was going to happen, but it didn't until he got to basic training. And it became a problem. The young man did sign paperwork saying that there was nothing wrong with him during the recruitment process, but he said that this was because the recruiter told him to. And the recruiter also told him that the more boxes you check, the more reasons you're giving the Army to reject you. Thankfully, it looks like he's not going to be punished for enlisting because he does have the texts that show that he told the recruiter about those conditions and that he kept telling him the Army doesn't need to know. But I was surprised. I did not know that autism, any diagnosis of autism, because he said he had been diagnosed with Asperger's, was disqualifying for service in the Army. Anyways, that is it for today. It has been an eventful week, but we're into September, which is my favorite month of the year. That is it for today. If you like this video, we'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in all things autism, we would love it if you'd hit subscribe. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.